Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as folks join, they can read the captions from what we just said. So welcome to Drupal's place in composable DXP strategy. Hint, it's key. Today we're going to spend some time talking about digital experiences, what a digital experience platform is and can be, and how to think about Drupal's place within DXP and capitalize on its composability. We'll definitely be reserving time at the end for questions, but as Dave just mentioned, feel free to use chat to submit questions as they come up. We structured this a little bit more panel-like in the spirit of keeping it a little more conversational, although we do have a presentation prepared for you today. And with that, I will kick off introductions. Hello, everyone. I am Sam Schreiber. I am the Director of Solutions at FFW, a global agency that's focused on the strategy and development of excellent digital experiences. I've been working in and among Drupal and Drupalists for my entire web career, spanning the last decade. And before I think more about that and the period of time that has passed, I'm going to pass it over to Dave to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Sam. I'm Dave Sawyer. I'm the Director of Insights and Optimization at FFW as well. We're the data and analytics team at our agency. And I too have spent a long time in the Drupal community. I'm a proud 10-year member of the Drupal Association and have presented numerous talks at DrupalCons and Drupal events in the past. So I'm super excited to be here at my first remote DrupalCon experience.
Mine as well. And before we move on, we do want to just mention that in the session description, you might have seen mention of our colleague, Ben Allgood, who is not feeling well today. So we will be carrying on without him, but he is here very much in spirit. All right. So in the digital age of effective customer engagement, that is really powered by digital experiences. It's right there in the name. And as the slides show, digitally mature companies are more profitable. The MIT Initiative on Digital Economy found that 23%, that digitally mature companies were 23% more profitable than their less mature peers. But what's interesting about that is that in a survey conducted by Harvey Nash of CIOs in 2017, they found that less than 1 in 5 companies would rank themselves as very effective with digital transformation. And in fact, that same survey found that over 50% would not classify themselves as would classify themselves as not effective at all. So why is this, right? The challenge with conceiving and executing effective digital transformation is that it's very complex. Digital experiences are complex. And for a satisfying customer experience to exist, everything must appear simple and seamless. But as we all know, beneath that customer-facing simplicity are all the ideas and decisions, all the various tools and systems, the time and the money and the expertise that are necessary to enable success with that experience. It's a massive undertaking to do it right, and many organizations struggle to manage all of that in a cohesive way, especially as circumstances change within their organization or the world, as we have seen in the past year, or there are just other unexpected bumps along the way. And this is where a digital experience platform, or DXP, can make the difference between success and failure. So what is a DXP and how does it factor into the equation? Gartner defines DXP as an integrated set of core technologies that support the composition, management, delivery, and optimization of contextualized digital experiences. I know it's a mouthful, but as you can see from their Magic Quadrant, it maps out a selection of the leading DXP solutions offered on the market, from Adobe and Acquia to Kentco. The problem with this chart and the implications that it has for Gartner's definition of DXP is that it makes DXP synonymous with a piece of technology, presenting it as though it's a single solution that is suitable for being the whole solution. At FFW, we like to think about DXP a little bit differently. At the most simplistic level, digital experience platforms enable digital experiences. That's the pretty obvious part, right? So if we think about DXP as a foundation from an enablement perspective, we can conclude that a DXP is a collection of tools and systems that enable digital experiences. In other words, as we like to put it, a DXP is a stack of capabilities, empowering your customer engagement across channels, across audiences. These capabilities range from things like content management, of course, to measurement, personalization, e-commerce, marketing, and many, many more things that aren't represented here on the slide. But it's more than just smart technology that propels a DXP to success. If you'll recall from those stats earlier, over 50% of digital transformation efforts, in the opinion of CIOs, are not effective. We believe that's because approaching a digital transformation effort or a DXP initiative as a purely technical exercise is a recipe for failure. And I represent the solutions team, which houses the solutions architects and helps to solution technical solutions. And I'm still saying that. The idea that we have is that excellent digital experiences are built by leveraging technologies, of course, that's the digital part, but they should be informed by design and measurement strategies to not only inform the creation of an intentional experience that's been grounded in your stakeholder and customer insights, but also to measure its effectiveness and have mechanisms for acting on what you learned. So technologies, when coupled with these strategies, can be transformative and the basis of an effective DXP that creates a stack of capabilities you can use to succeed. So where does Drupal fit in? With its really long and rich history of focusing on composability, Drupal is really well suited as a foundation for any DXP. Its core competencies in API-first architecture and atomic data structures ensure that as a content management framework, it can enable myriad customer experiences through integrations, native functionality, contributed modules, or even just smart architecture decisions. And you're probably thinking about, because it's DrupalCon 2021, utilizing headless or decoupled Drupal in the context of thinking about a DXP. And that can provide a very robust and strong core to power everything from your websites to your online store, marketing campaigns, ads, and more. And there have been a multitude of decoupled and headless talks throughout this conference that really explore that facet of Drupal's nature. Today, what Dave and I wanted to talk through is how you can move as an organization along that digital maturity spectrum so that you can be more profitable while still targeting being in that 19% plus very effective group for digital transformation. And we're going to do that through talking about taking a more traditional stack based in Drupal and starting to think about your platform as the groundwork for composable, scalable DXP, focusing on content composability. So with that, Dave, would you mind talking us through a little bit about what we mean by composability and why Drupal's a great fit?
Absolutely. So for me, this word composability is actually really fun in this conversation because it refers to multiple things. At a high level, composability is describing a system that is changeable, allowing parts to be swapped out or rearranged for different needs. So in one sense, composable DXP is describing the platform or the stack itself and the individual pieces of that stack and how those can be rearranged according to the needs of a specific business or organization. But as we dig in on that, let's ask, with Drupal positioned as a piece and an important one of a composable DXP, what makes Drupal particularly good at being composable and fitting in this way? And the first one has to do with flexible architecture. Here we are at the largest Drupal event in the world. So many of us working on solving problems today with different needs for solutions architecture based on Drupal. And one of the most common topics within this has to do with the idea of to couple or not to couple. So we're referring here to the idea that Drupal in one way can deliver an experience where the back end and the front end are coupled. They're delivered and integrated as one cohesive unit. Drupal also can support decoupled architectures, where the front end is a completely separate application and is abstracted from the back end, which is where we're storing the content in the files. So Drupal actually is super flexible in the sense that it works in many different scenarios with regard to this idea of coupling. And one of the reasons why this is really important is that as organizations are going through digital transformation initiatives, moving away from a traditional CMS setup towards a fully articulated digital experience platform, what they need often is flexibility to start to swap out pieces of their stack over time and to choose from the best in breed tools to arrange just the stack that suits their particular needs. So this is one of the main reasons that Drupal is an ideal CMS platform in a DXP stack, is that it allows for any range of coupling, from fully decoupled to progressively or partially decoupled to coupled entirely. The next one has to do with Drupal's strengths. And one of Drupal's strengths, I think we can all agree, has to do with how effective it is at managing highly structured content. For years, this has been a strength of Drupal, and today it's even stronger than ever at this. Taxonomy, tagging, content types, fieldable entities, relationships between entities, the inner workings of Drupal make it an ideal content management platform to manage content that's highly structured. And this is a good thing for many different types of use cases outside of traditional content management, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. The third has to do with feature extendability. Drupal itself is super extensible and customizable. You can leverage pre-built functionality or install modules, but you can also write your own functionality and extend it in the way you need. And as we've said, flexibility is key to composability. And lastly, platform integrations. If you think of a DXP as a stack, as we're suggesting today, then the CMS within that stack is inevitably going to need to integrate with many other systems. Drupal might integrate with a content syndication system, or a customer data platform, or a CRM system, or a product information database. So depending on your unique needs, there are going to be many points of integration, and therefore you need a platform that's really good at integrations in an API first approach. So these are four of the main reasons why Drupal, compared to other CMS platforms, for example, is really well suited as a platform to build out your composable DXP. But as we're talking about the idea of the composable DXP today as a stack, let's not get too lost in the technology, because that's a whole range of challenges for organizations, connecting lots of systems. We have to remember that part of the success of rolling out a DXP is remembering that a DXP is about delivering composable dynamic experiences, which ultimately comes back to the content in those experiences. So composable experiences start, in a sense, with composable content. And so let's break down a little bit about what that means. And so you can start to consider these topics as you're planning your move towards this type of architecture. One of the most in-demand topics in our conversation as an agency is how to move away from one-size-fits-all website designs and page-based websites towards highly contextualized, personalized experiences that allow organizations to tailor content to the unique needs of a particular audience segment and to conduct experiments to allow content to flow and change dynamically in real time. So to do that, you need to have experiences and designs that are meant to be composable. And this is why I said earlier that I think the word composable is sort of fun here, because in one lens, it's describing the composability of the stack itself and the components of the stack. But through another light, the idea of composable describes the experience and how the experience can have parts that are changeable, swappable, and can be rearranged in different contexts depending on the needs of different audience segments. So this is maybe an overlooked area as an organization aims to move towards a DXP architecture, building out their stack. Oftentimes, a lot of the focus is on technology, but we need to come back to content and make sure that we're planning in this initiative towards highly contextualized composable experiences, that content management needs are looked at in this dynamic and composable way as well.
Yeah, and one of the common discussions that we have as an agency around getting started in this space is the discussion of systems architecture and the technical solution that will solve the customer experience needs and the challenges of the business. And often through the process of getting to know our clients and working with them, where we spend the bulk of our decision-making and strategizing time is exactly in this space, really boiling it down to who are your audiences, what content do they need, and in what context, and how can we structure that in a way that will allow you to do all of those things from that capability side that you may be wanting to tackle: personalization, experimentation, and all the Asians that we're talking about these days in the digital space. Before we get into questions and talk a little bit more about some of the topics you all may be curious about, given the context of our presentation today, we wanted to leave you with this quote from Mark Twain. The secret of getting ahead is getting started, and the secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable tasks and starting on the first one. We truly believe as an agency that that is the best way to look at digital transformation, digital maturity, evolution in the digital space. And for all the reasons Dave outlined and many, many more, Drupal is a wonderful system for giving you the power to do that. And we hope that through talking through and thinking through DXP and what it can mean for you, we've given you a way to take this concept of a DXP and make it more digestible, rather than thinking of it as this massive monolithic system that you have to spend years and millions investing in, and then you can have this cutover moment and a big reveal that you're now on your DXP as opposed to your old system, that you can think of DXP more as we do, as a stack of capabilities. And if you're looking at it from a capability standpoint, you can, as Mark Twain says, break it into small manageable tasks and just start with the first one. And as you think about transforming or creating a DXP, we hope that you'll keep Drupal in mind and FFW as well. And we wanted to thank you for your time today. And if you were interested in FFW's thoughts more in the design system space, Dave and our colleague Ben have presented on the very topic of optimizing design systems for DXP, and we've linked that presentation from Acquia Engage in our presentation deck. So we'll take questions now, but before you leave the room and go about your day, please make sure to click the survey link and let us know, and let the Drupal Association know what you thought of the presentation. And we also encourage you to head to our booth and click the donate $5 to Smile Train button when you do. We're donating $5 to our nonprofit client Smile Train for each attendee who visits and clicks. And we're also presenting with them at the Nonprofit Summit on April 27th, if you'd like to learn more about the work that they're doing and how we supported them in their replatform from Drupal 7. But that's all of the, let me read all of the legal jargon at the end of the presentation, but I want to get into questions. So if anyone has any questions, please shoot them in the chat and we can dive right in.
Looks like there is a question. I'd be happy to jump on this one as our first question today. The question in the chat says, the smart content module appears to be a way to provide personalization, composable, question mark, through traditional build approach. If you're familiar with that module perspective, I'd be happy to respond to that. So I am familiar with the module you're referring to. For those listening into the session today that would like to look this up, you can go to Drupal.org and search within the contributed modules there for a module called Smart Content. You'll see it described there. Smart Content is a module contributed by an agency into the Drupal community, which provides not just a set of features, but a framework. So you'll notice when you look into it, there are a number of sub-modules or related modules that also work with it. And the intent of this module is to enable a dynamic experience inside of Drupal using Drupal functionality as opposed to an external tool. So what I mean by that is that organizations and marketing teams that wish to make their experiences dynamic in nature, such as to enable experimentation, A/B testing, multivariate testing, and targeted personalization, will often use a third-party or completely external tool that's very much detached from Drupal. Examples of this are Optimizely or Google Optimize, for example. And so these tools often integrate with the front end, although back-end integrations are possible, which means that the communication between the CMS platform and the experimentation or personalization platform is one that happens through client-side code. They're disconnected. In this case, the question was referring to Drupal modules. So those modules take a different approach and say, let's build the functionality that allows experiences to be to change in real time, to respond in real time to individual users. Let's build that functionality into the Drupal stack. This is a very interesting approach. It comes with some pros and cons. And so I would, as with any kind of evaluation, focus in on some of those pros and cons. One of which I can share right now is just food for thought, is that anytime you're building your own functionality into your own platform, in this case a Drupal platform, you're sort of taking on ownership of supporting that functionality and maintaining it and addressing needs with that functionality, as opposed to, of course, the use of a third-party tool or platform, which would be documented and supported by a vendor, and allowing you to sort of outsource that piece of your DXP stack. Again, pros and cons to each, but really good question and an important one in this context of DXP. Again, flexibility, giving organizations choices on how to enable different capabilities. All right, let's see if we have any other questions.
Looks like we have one around the flexibility of Drupal's architecture, and could we elaborate on the differences between coupled and decoupled in the context of why they matter for composable DXP?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I suppose you can find other DrupalCon talks which will get into the technical sides of this conversation. In other words, why an organization would choose a fully coupled or fully decoupled architectural from a development or technical perspective. But let's remember here the difference between a CMS and a DXP. We might think of the CMS as a system that's managing content in the context of a website, whereas a DXP is often seen as a platform in a multi-channel context. So back to the question, the reason why this architecture is particularly important is because in order to make content reusable across channels, for example, website, native app, online store, social and email channels, it's often advantageous to decouple the front end of the website from the back end. In this sense, Drupal becomes focused on managing and delivering that content out, but then the front end way that content is displayed is specific to different channels. So oftentimes in a DXP stack, you'll see a decoupled architecture used for this reason. But really good question.
We have another question about avoiding talking about solutions early in the project process, and how do we focus on the analytical aspect instead of the technical early in the sales and project process? That is a wonderful question. And our approach, and my personal approach as well, is to really focus on the challenges and opportunities. People like to talk about the things they want to see get better. And for organizations that are particularly customer focused or client focused, they can be really excited to talk about how to make things better for their end user, and getting folks to focus on that rather than the technology, and having good insights when they do bring up those challenges and how to turn those into opportunities and how to solve those challenges will allow them to build the trust in you that you'll come up with a technical solution that will solve their problems and stop them from solutioning. But it also allows the conversation to organically and naturally go more toward experience and less toward solution. And if they are an organization, as we do often run into, who wish they could be super focused on their customers or end users, but in reality just have to be more focused on internal stakeholders and their business needs, fair enough. It's still the same kind of concept, really digging into what are the challenges that your organization is facing from the stakeholder point of view, what are the opportunities that we have here, and let's think about the roadmap to solving those problems, and the technology will come. Any path we want to go down, there will be a way to solve what you're looking to solve. So let's really figure out what you're looking to solve first. So we try to do that in the sales process through early conversations. And then that is a core component to our early discovery engagements or requirements gatherings phases of projects. Hope that's answered your question. Dave, I think this is a great question for you. As you think about content composability, how should you be thinking about measurement and analytics? We have our kind of three-tiered pillar of success, and we talked a little bit about content design and technology, but we haven't talked too much about measurement and analytics. So where does that fit into all this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe a talk in and of itself, but I'll kind of respond with 2 quick points. One is through the lens of experience optimization, right? Oftentimes to enable optimized experiences, we need the ability, as we've said earlier, for those experiences to be composable and adaptable to enable use cases like A/B testing and personalization. So to do that, we often need to expose data, sometimes in the form of a data layer, to make those experiences changeable based on certain criteria. So oftentimes, back to the question, data and analytics is the lens through which you are looking at what is the data in this structured content CMS that needs to be exposed, and then what are the systems that either need to consume that data, like an analytics platform like Google Analytics, or an experimentation or A/B testing platform. In other words, having certain tests show up or not depending on certain metadata in the page. So that's the experience optimization lens of exposing structured data to facilitate experience optimization. I think the other side of this, of course, is that from a decision-making perspective, as you're looking at making decisions to fine-tune and improve your DXP stack, analytics is often going to give you a lot of context as to where improvements are needed. For example, if you operate a network of different subdomain sites or have different digital properties, and you're prioritizing budget for how to merge some of those together or to look at ways to improve content, your analytics data is going to tell you a lot about where to focus first. So just a couple of thoughts on how analytics is really key, both to improving the experience for users as well as improving the architecture of the DXP stack.
Awesome. A question from your long lost cousin, Scott. In a decoupled approach, is the idea that a front end composes the content using the DXP to decide which content, is the idea that it decides which content from Drupal is presented if you're decoupling?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think Scott, you've landed right on it. Absolutely. So, but think of it this way: in a fully coupled approach, right? The browser's making a request, an HTTP request. That request, when responded to, is delivering the full HTML payload, all of the HTML and the JavaScript and the CES. That full front end experience and all of the content is all inside of that, right? And so the problem with that from a multi-channel perspective for many organizations, I should say, is that it's harder to get that content out of that front end wrapper that's perfect for a website, but maybe not what you need for a TV set-top box or a native mobile app. So back to the question, in the decoupled approach, the idea is that Drupal is serving up the content which is made accessible through an API, such as a REST API. And then you can build different applications which consume that content. And those applications can have their own business logic, right? Maybe the native application has a different way of displaying content conditionally in certain cases than the website or web application does. So this decoupled architecture, again, gives flexibility to build different business logic and different front-end theming into each application across different channels and use cases.
You've essentially got a switchboard that's routing the incoming calls before they get to the content management system, Drupal in this case, for answering and responding. Yeah,
I will say, like, as just an example from a project we worked on, we were working with a large application which was actually a coupled experience in terms of the front end of the website experience, but we needed to take data that was managed in Drupal and expose that actually for TV set-top boxes in a TV use case. So in this case, it was a best of both worlds approach where the front end of the website was delivered in HTML, CSS more with a traditional coupled approach, but using Drupal and again giving us the flexibility that we needed, we exposed a REST API that allowed the data within Drupal to be consumed by those other platforms. Again, allowing Drupal to serve up just the content and the data without all of that website specific wrapping and presentation layers. So coming back again to Drupal every time, it just gives us a lot of flexibility of how we would build out an architecture to support use cases across channels. All right, looks like there's one more question.
I think so. What are the common pitfalls we've seen with organizations who are attempting to rethink their content to create composable content? Going back to your thesis that that's where we really need to start, because that's the best way to get that flexibility into your DXP and the ultimate experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when we say pitfall is that creating experiences that are highly contextualized and that respond in real time to individual users is something that's super aspirational for many organizations, right? Everyone wants personalization on their site. They want to make sure their site is relevant to each type of user. So sometimes what we see is that organizations attempt to solve this problem with technology by buying a solution that would enable that capability. And as we've said earlier in this presentation, technology is just one of the spokes of the DXP concept from our perspective, with experience and data being the others. So back to the question, one of the common pitfalls is focusing too much on the technology side and not spending enough time thinking about, for example, the content. To put that into more specific terms, if you think of a simple use case for personalization, where the carousel or the hero image of your homepage might be swapped out to something different depending on which type of audience segment is browsing the website. What this implies from a content management perspective is that someone is actually writing different versions of that homepage hero. So an organization that's never done this before is thinking in terms of managing just one homepage hero. But with this new paradigm, they actually have to manage maybe 7 or 8 different variations of the same content asset. So the pitfall in this case is around content management, content strategy, and content planning, and not leaving enough time in a strategy plan to account for those types of needs.
To piggyback off that, or kind of take it from a different angle too, I think the central premise that we have going into an engagement is thinking of things, no matter how much your active engagement or project is going to encompass, as steps on a path. And oftentimes when we're working with folks who have, for whatever reason, struggled to keep up in terms of digital maturity, and they're ready to, for lack of a better phrase, pull that trigger, oftentimes they're not prepared to think about it in steps and to think about how to fully complete a step before moving on to the next one. So that goes along very much with what Dave's saying about thinking about the technology and the shortcuts. In our experience, trying to shortcut to the end ideal state is not going to lead to really great results. It's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be super adoptable for your internal content creators. And you may just overall miss the mark in terms of what your customers want for an experience. So for us, the shortcuts or the ways to make it easier for yourself is to look at it as iterative, to look at it as never ending, to break from this idea of getting it done and then you've done it, and having a path for continual iteration and improvement. And that speaks a lot to our perspective on data playing such a large role here, to Dave's point for the earlier question, that without an informed decision-making process, you can't take those steps down that road because you're making a lot of assumptions and hoping for the best.
Absolutely. All right, let's see if there are any other questions.
And I know we're a little bit over time, so we appreciate everybody hanging out with us.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for all the questions, everyone. I think that we've been able to touch on all the questions that were submitted.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. And we hope you have a wonderful end to DrupalCon and an end to your week and a wonderful weekend. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.